Hey everyone, before we dive into this powerful and emotional story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This is a true-to-life drama about courage, injustice, and the fight to be heard. Stay with us, you won't want to miss a moment. The city at night had a way of swallowing people whole, turning familiar streets into shadowy corridors where every sound echoed like a warning. Aaliyah pulled her leather jacket tighter around her as she walked down Maple Avenue. It was past midnight, and the usual buzz of cars and chatter had died down to a low hum. Streetlights flickered intermittently, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the cracked pavement. Aaliyah was 28, a woman who had learned the city's rhythms, its dangers, and its silent codes, the hard way. Tonight, like many nights before, she was heading home after a late shift at the coffee shop downtown. Her worn boots tapped against the sidewalk, steady and confident, but inside, a familiar unease stirred. As she approached the corner near the old convenience store, she noticed a group of 3 men standing by the flickering neon sign. They looked out of place here, clean-cut in jeans and jackets, laughing and joking with each other, their voices loud enough to cut through the night's quiet. The moment her eyes met theirs, the mood shifted. Aaliyah glanced at them casually. Nothing more than a quick look, the kind that any stranger might give in passing. But the men didn't see it that way. Suddenly, whistles pierced the air, sharp and mocking. One of the men called out, voice rough. "Hey, baby, you lost, or just looking for trouble?" Another laughed, adding, "You think you belong here, huh?" Aaliyah's heart clenched. She quickened her pace, heels clicking faster against the pavement, but the sound of footsteps behind her grew louder. She didn't dare look back. She knew the game, how these encounters could escalate, how being a black woman in this city meant constantly watching her back, measuring every move. But tonight, something felt different, more dangerous. Turning onto a side street, Aaliyah spotted a narrow alley bathed in darkness. She slipped inside, hoping to wait until the men passed by. Her breath came in shallow bursts, the cold air sharp in her lungs. The alley smelled of damp concrete and old garbage. The walls were covered with faded graffiti, telling stories of a neighborhood forgotten by time. She pressed herself against the brick, listening. Footsteps approached. Slow, deliberate. They stopped at the alley's entrance. "I see you," one voice said, low and dangerous. "Thought you could disappear, huh?" Aaliyah's heart pounded so hard she thought they'd hear it. She held her breath as a shadow moved closer. One of the men stepped into the dim light, blocking her path. His face was cold, eyes hard. "I seen you checking us out, you black bitch. Think you can play with us?" Aaliyah swallowed the lump rising in her throat. She straightened her shoulders, meeting his gaze. "No," she said quietly. "I wasn't looking for anything." The man sneered, taking a step closer. His hand brushed against her arm. She flinched but didn't pull away. "Maybe you're just scared," he hissed. Her mind raced. She needed to get out, to find help. But the alley was a dead end. The other 2 men appeared behind him, flanking her. For a moment, the world narrowed to the cold bricks, the harsh voices, the ache of being trapped. Then, Aaliyah's phone buzzed in her pocket. The sudden noise startled the men. She pulled it out, a text from her friend, Marcus, checking if she was on her way home. "This isn't worth it," she said firmly, eyes locked on the leader. "I don't want trouble." The men exchanged glances. The tension thickened. Then, from the street outside, a siren wailed in the distance. The men hesitated, then vanished into the shadows as quickly as they had come. Aaliyah stood alone, trembling but alive. She slid down to the ground, tears stinging her eyes. This wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last. The morning light filtered weakly through the threadbare curtains as Aaliyah sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the cracked ceiling. The events of last night replayed relentlessly in her mind, a loop of whispered threats and harsh laughter. She rubbed her arms, trying to shake off the cold that had settled deep inside her. Her apartment was small and cramped, cluttered with the remnants of a life spent trying to keep everything together. The peeling wallpaper, the creaky floorboards, the faded photograph of her mother smiling back at her from the nightstand. All pieces of a story she wasn't ready to tell anyone. She reached for her phone and typed a quick message to Marcus. "Thanks for checking in. I'm okay." She stared at the screen for a moment before putting it down, unsure if she really believed those words herself. The coffee shop where she worked was only a few blocks away, But the walk felt longer today. Every shadow seemed to twist into a threat, every passerby's glance a potential challenge. She ducked into a small cafe down the street, ordering a black coffee and trying to steady her nerves. "Rough night?" the barista asked gently as she handed over the cup. Aaliyah managed a faint smile. Something like that. She didn't want to explain, not yet. The story was too raw, too personal. But inside, a familiar anger burned. Anger at the men who thought they could intimidate her. Anger at a city that allowed such things to happen. Anger at herself for feeling afraid. The day passed in a haze of steam and voices. She kept her head down, lost in the routine of orders and payments. But every time she stepped outside, the weight of last night returned, dragging at her like a storm cloud. At lunch, she met Marcus in the park across the street. He was a tall man with kind eyes and a quiet strength, someone who understood the unspoken battles she fought every day. "You don't have to pretend with me," he said, handing her a sandwich. "I'm just tired," she admitted. "Of feeling like I have to watch my back all the time." He nodded, understanding. "It's not fair." "No, it's not." They sat in silence for a moment, watching children play and couples walk by. The city carried on around them, indifferent to the fears and hopes tucked away in its corners. That evening, as Aaliyah walked home, she took a different route, one that passed through a busy street with plenty of people around. She told herself it was safer, but the shadow inside her hadn't lifted. She stopped at a streetlight, waiting for the walk sign, and took a deep breath. Maybe someday, she thought, the night would stop feeling so dangerous. But until then, she would keep walking. Days passed, but the echo of that night lingered like a shadow she couldn't shake. Each evening, as darkness crept over the city, Aaliyah felt the familiar tightening in her chest, the warning that danger could be lurking just out of sight. Her black leather jacket, once a symbol of strength and style, now felt like armor against a world that often seemed cruel and unforgiving. The jeans she wore every day became her uniform of survival, practical and unpretentious. One evening, after a long shift at the cafe, Aaliyah decided to take a different path home, a route she hadn't used before. The streets were quieter here, less familiar. The glow of the street lamps flickered sporadically, casting long, uneasy shadows on the cracked pavement. As she walked, her phone vibrated in her pocket. A message from Marcus. "Need to talk. Now. Meet me at the park?" Her heart beat faster. She sent a quick reply. "Okay. Be there in 5. The park was dimly lit, the benches empty except for a stray cat curled up near the fountain. Marcus was already there, pacing nervously. "What's going on?" Aaliyah asked as she approached. He looked up. "I'm serious. I've been hearing things. About those guys who harassed you." She stiffened. "What kind of things?" "People say they've been causing trouble around here. Harassing other women too. And there's talk they're connected to some gang. It's bigger than just you." Aaliyah swallowed hard. The weight of the situation pressed down on her. She'd thought it was just a random incident, but now it seemed to be part of something more dangerous. "Have you told the police?" she asked quietly. Marcus shook his head. "You know how it is. They don't always take these things seriously, especially if you're a woman of color." Aaliyah clenched her fists. "So what do? We look out for each other," Marcus said firmly. "We gather evidence, keep records. If it gets worse, we find a way to make them accountable." For the first time in days, Aaliyah felt a spark of hope. Maybe she wasn't alone in this fight. As they talked, a sudden noise startled them, footsteps approaching fast. Both turned sharply. A shadow passed by, disappearing into the night. "Stay safe," Marcus said as they parted ways. Walking home, Aaliyah realized that her fear was no longer just personal. It was part of a larger struggle, a fight against silence, against invisibility. And she was ready to face it. The days that followed were a whirlwind of cautious vigilance. Aaliyah found herself constantly looking over her shoulder, every sound in the city amplified by the tension simmering beneath her skin. The black leather jacket felt heavier with each passing moment, as if it carried not just warmth, but the weight of the unspoken threat. At work, she tried to focus on her tasks, the steady stream of customers, the clinking of coffee cups, the hum of conversation. But her mind kept drifting back to that night and the shadow it cast over her life. One afternoon, Marcus showed up unexpectedly during her break. His face was grim, eyes sharp with concern. "We need to talk," he said quietly, leading her outside into the alley behind the cafe. Aaliyah's heart pounded. "What is it?" "I got some information," Marcus began, lowering his voice. "Those guys, they're involved in more than just harassment. Drug trafficking, intimidation. The whole block's been under their thumb." Her stomach churned. She knew things were bad, but hearing it confirmed made the danger undeniable. "They've been targeting people who don't fit their idea of control," Marcus continued. "Women like you. People who try to speak up or walk their own path." Aaliyah swallowed, feeling a mix of fear and anger. "I don't want to be a victim," she said firmly. "I want to fight." Marcus nodded. "We need to be smart. Gather proof. Videos, witnesses. I've started talking to some neighbors, trying to build a case." For the first time, Aaliyah saw a plan forming, a way to push back. But that night, as she walked home, the city's dark whispers became reality. The same 3 men appeared, blocking her path near the corner. "We warned you," the tallest one sneered. "This ain't a game." Aaliyah's heart raced, but she stood her ground. "I'm not afraid." Suddenly, one of them lunged forward. The scuffle was brief but fierce, and Aaliyah's scream shattered the silence. From the shadows, a figure emerged, Marcus, pulling the men away and shouting for help. Neighbors, alerted by the noise, began to gather, their presence forcing the attackers to retreat. Breathless and shaken, Aaliyah realized the fight had only just begun. But with allies by her side, she felt a flicker of strength she hadn't known she still possessed. The aftermath of that night left Aaliyah with bruises not only on her skin but deep in her spirit. She had always been proud of her strength, but now she understood how fragile safety could be, especially for a young black woman walking alone at night. At home, she sat on the worn couch, tracing the faded patterns on the fabric, her mind swirling with a mix of fear and determination. Marcus had stayed with her until the early hours, reassuring her that she wasn't alone. "We'll get through this," he said softly, his voice steady. "But we have to be careful. These guys aren't just bullies, they're dangerous." Aaliyah nodded, steeling herself. "I want to fight back. Not just for me, but for all the women who live like this every day." In the following days, they worked together to gather evidence. Marcus used his contacts to discreetly record the men's movements, while Aaliyah spoke with neighbors who had been too afraid to come forward before. Each story added pieces to the puzzle, revealing a network of intimidation and violence. One evening, as Aaliyah prepared to close up the cafe, a familiar figure approached, Detective Reynolds, a middle-aged black woman known for her integrity and determination. "I heard about what happened," the detective said quietly, "and I want to help. We need witnesses, proof, everything you can give me." Relief flooded Aaliyah. "Thank you. It means a lot." Detective Reynolds explained the challenges ahead. The system often failed victims like Aaliyah, but with solid evidence and community support, they had a chance to bring the perpetrators to justice. As the investigation unfolded, Aaliyah's resolve grew. She trained herself to walk confidently, to hold her head high, refusing to let fear dictate her life. But the shadow of threat remained. One night, a broken bottle was thrown at her window, a chilling reminder that the fight was far from over. Yet, surrounded by allies and fueled by courage, Aaliyah faced the coming days ready to reclaim her power, one step at a time. The investigation was slowly gaining momentum. Detective Reynolds moved carefully but decisively, gathering statements and securing surveillance footage from nearby shops. The community began to whisper more openly about the harassment and violence, a subtle shift from silence to solidarity. Aaliyah felt the weight of every step she took. She wasn't just walking for herself anymore. She was walking for all the women who had been silenced by fear. One evening, as she left the cafe after closing, she noticed a black SUV parked suspiciously across the street. The windows were tinted, but the engine idled low and steady. A chill ran down her spine. She hurried her pace, clutching the leash of her German Shepherd mix, Jet, who padded calmly beside her. The dog sensed her tension and stayed alert, ears perked. As she crossed the street, the SUV's door clicked open. 2 men stepped out, their faces obscured by shadows. One of them called out, "Hey, Aaliyah." Her heart thundered. She recognized the voice, one of the men who had harassed her. "What do you want?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "We just want to talk," the other said, stepping closer, a cruel smile playing on his lips. Aaliyah tightened her grip on Jet's leash. I'm not interested. Suddenly, Jet growled low and menacing. The men paused, eyes flicking to the dog. You don't want to mess with this, Aaliyah said firmly. The men exchanged a glance, then stepped back into the SUV, doors slamming shut. The engine roared to life, and the vehicle sped away. Aaliyah exhaled slowly, relief washing over her. But she knew this wasn't over. That night, she called Marcus. They're watching me. We expected that, he replied. We just have to stay ahead. Over the next days, Aaliyah began to carry pepper spray and avoided walking alone at night. She also started attending community meetings where women shared their stories and strategies for safety. Through these connections, Aaliyah found strength. She wasn't alone. Together, they were a force. Yet every time she looked over her shoulder, the fear lingered. The fight for justice wasn't just about the men who threatened her. It was about reclaiming her right to walk freely, without fear, in the city she called home. The days grew hotter as summer settled over the city, but the tension surrounding Aaliyah seemed to thicken like humidity in the air. Every morning, she woke with a knot of anxiety in her stomach, wondering if that day would bring something worse. At the cafe, the atmosphere buzzed with the usual rush of customers, but Aaliyah's mind was often elsewhere, replaying moments of confrontation and imagining worst-case scenarios. Jet, her loyal German Shepherd mix, remained her constant companion, his quiet presence a balm in her restless nights. One afternoon, as she closed the cafe, Marcus approached with an expression both serious and hopeful. I've got something, he said, pulling out a small USB drive. This is security footage from the night they attacked you. You're in it, along with the 3 men. Aaliyah's fingers trembled as she took the drive. This could be the evidence we need. Marcus nodded. Detective Reynolds can use it to press charges. But be careful. Once this goes public, those guys will know. That night, Aaliyah sat with the footage on her laptop. The grainy video showed everything. The men jeering, the confrontation, the moment when one of them reached out to touch her before Marcus intervened. It was brutal, but undeniable. With this proof, Aaliyah felt a surge of hope. Maybe justice was within reach. But the victory was bittersweet. The following evening, as she walked Jet near her apartment, she noticed a figure lurking near the streetlight. Her heart hammered in her chest. Hey, Aaliyah, came a voice she wished she could forget. It was the tallest of the men, the one who'd been the most aggressive. Leave me alone, she said firmly, trying to mask the tremble in her voice. He stepped closer, a cruel smile stretching across his face. You think a video will scare us? We're not done. Suddenly, Jet growled fiercely, stepping between Aaliyah and the man. The aggressor hesitated, glancing at the dog, then laughed. Whatever, he spat, before disappearing into the night. Aaliyah exhaled, heart pounding. She knew this was far from over. Over the next weeks, with Detective Reynolds' help, the case against the men grew stronger. Witnesses came forward, emboldened by Aaliyah's courage and the growing community support. At a neighborhood meeting, Aaliyah spoke quietly but firmly. We can't stay silent anymore. Together, we can stand up to this. For ourselves, for each other. The room filled with nods and murmurs of agreement. Aaliyah realized her fight was no longer just personal. It had become a beacon of hope for many. But as the legal battle loomed, the threat from her attackers only intensified. The city's shadows seemed darker than ever. The city was cloaked in a heavy silence that felt unnatural, as if the very air was holding its breath. For Aaliyah, each day was a delicate balance between fear and determination. The warning she had received over the phone echoed in her mind like a constant drumbeat. We're watching you. Stop what you're doing, or you'll regret it. She stared at the dark screen of her phone long after the call had ended, her heart still pounding. It was an empty threat, or was it? The uncertainty gnawed at her. She had faced the 3 men before, but this felt different, colder, more calculated. Sitting at her kitchen table, the morning sunlight filtering weakly through the blinds, Aaliyah shared the message with Marcus. He frowned, the lines on his face deepening. We can't ignore this. They're trying to intimidate you into silence, he said quietly. Her mother's words came back to her. Stay strong, but be smart. She knew Marcus was right. Silence was no longer an option, but recklessness could be deadly. Together, they contacted Detective Reynolds, who listened carefully and nodded gravely. This is escalation, Reynolds said. We'll increase patrols around your neighborhood, install cameras at your apartment, and I'll have an officer accompany you when you need it. The protective measures gave Aaliyah a small comfort, but she couldn't shake the feeling of eyes watching her every move. The tension was a thick fog she carried everywhere. One afternoon, as she walked Jet through a nearby park, the shadows seemed to lengthen unnaturally. Across the street, a group of men gathered, their eyes locked on her. Their gazes were sharp, cold, and filled with menace. Jet's ears perked up, his body stiffening beside her. Aaliyah's hand tightened around his leash. "You think you're untouchable?" One of the men called out, his voice carrying over the distance like a challenge. She met his stare steadily, her voice calm but firm. "I'm not afraid." The men exchanged smirks before dispersing into the crowd like ghosts dissolving at dawn. Aaliyah exhaled slowly, the adrenaline ebbing away. But she knew the warning was real. They were sending a message: this fight isn't over. That evening, in the cramped, dimly lit meeting room at the police station, Aaliyah, Marcus, and Detective Reynolds gathered once more. The hum of the overhead fluorescent lights filled the silence as they reviewed the growing evidence. Videos, witness statements, phone records. Reynolds leaned forward, her tone resolute. "We're building a case that can hold up in court, but the danger isn't just legal. It's personal. They want you to back down." Marcus glanced at Aaliyah with a mix of concern and pride. "You're stronger than you know, and you're not alone." The truth settled heavy in the room. This was not just Aaliyah's battle. It was a fight for every woman who had ever felt unsafe walking the streets at night. Back at her apartment, Aaliyah found solace in Jet's quiet companionship. The dog was more than a protector. He was a symbol of loyalty and strength. Yet, as she looked out her window into the darkened street below, she felt the weight of the city's shadows pressing in. The fight for justice, for dignity, was far from over. But in the depths of her heart, a fierce light burned, a promise to herself that no threat, no fear, would silence her voice or steal her right to live freely. The city's nights had become a battlefield where every shadow held a threat. Aaliyah's world, once familiar and simple, now spun on the edge of danger and defiance. The evidence against the three men was growing stronger, yet the personal cost of her courage weighed heavily. That evening, as dusk settled, Aaliyah found herself standing near the entrance of her apartment building. Jet sat quietly by her side, alert and calm. The streetlights flickered on, casting long, wavering shadows across the cracked pavement. Marcus approached with a folder under his arm, his expression grave. "They're moving fast," he said, lowering his voice. "I just got word. The three men have been spotted near your neighborhood again. We need to be careful." Aaliyah nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "I know, but I can't stop now. Not when we're this close." Inside the folder were photographs, witness accounts, and a preliminary report from Detective Reynolds detailing the mounting case. The evidence was solid, yet the men remained a menace, their threats growing more direct and personal. Days later, during a neighborhood meeting organized to raise awareness about the dangers faced by women like Aaliyah, the atmosphere was electric with a mix of fear, anger, and hope. "I've heard too many stories of silence and pain," Aaliyah said, her voice steady but charged with emotion. "If we don't stand together, nothing will change. We deserve safety, respect, and justice." Her words sparked applause, a chorus of voices rising in solidarity. Yet, the fight was far from over. That night, as Aaliyah walked Jet home, a car slowed beside her. The windows were tinted, the engines purred low and menacing. A figure inside rolled down the window slightly, revealing the smirk of one of the men. "You're making this personal, girl," he said, voice dripping with menace. "But this isn't over." Aaliyah's heart raced, but she kept her gaze steady. Jet growled low, the dog's protective instincts flaring. The car sped off into the darkness, leaving a cold silence in its wake. Back inside her apartment, Aaliyah sat with Marcus and Detective Reynolds, the weight of the night settling around them. "This is intimidation," Reynolds said firmly. "They're trying to scare you into giving up." Aaliyah clenched her fists. "I won't. If I back down now, they win." The detective nodded. "We'll increase surveillance and make sure you're never alone. This case is bigger than just you. It's about justice for everyone who's been silenced." Days turned into weeks as the legal battle progressed. Aaliyah testified in court, her voice unwavering despite the fear that gripped her. The men faced charges: harassment, intimidation, and assault, but the scars ran deeper than legal papers could reach. Through it all, Jet remained her steadfast guardian, the embodiment of loyalty and courage. Aaliyah's story spread throughout the community, inspiring others to speak out, to reclaim their right to walk freely without fear. But beneath the public victories lay a quiet truth. The road to justice was long, winding, and fraught with pain. Still, Aaliyah refused to let the darkness consume her. The courtroom was silent except for the measured footsteps of Aaliyah as she took her seat. The weight of weeks of fear, courage, and fight bore down on her shoulders, but her eyes shone with resolve. This moment was more than just a trial, it was a reckoning. The prosecutor laid out the case meticulously: the harassment, the stalking, the threats, and the final night when the police officer shot Jet. Each piece of evidence, each testimony, wove a story of injustice and cruelty. Aaliyah's voice, calm but firm, painted the picture of a woman pushed to the edge but unwilling to break. Outside the courtroom, a small crowd gathered: neighbors, friends, supporters, their faces a mixture of hope and anxiety. The case had sparked conversations, shaking the community awake to the reality many faced but too often ignored. The defense tried to twist the narrative, claiming fear and misunderstanding. Yet the truth, stubborn and undeniable, stood firm. When the verdict was finally read, a hush fell over the room. The men were found guilty of harassment and intimidation. The police officer faced disciplinary action, though many argued it was not enough. Aaliyah felt a rush of relief, but also a deep sadness. Jet was gone, and no verdict could bring him back. Later, in the quiet of her apartment, she sat alone, the emptiness heavy around her. Marcus's words echoed in her mind. This isn't the end. It's a beginning. Tears came slowly, a release of the pain held tight for so long. But amid the sorrow was a seed of hope, a determination that Jet's death would not be in vain, that her fight would pave the way for safer streets and stronger voices. In the weeks that followed, Aaliyah became an advocate, sharing her story, pushing for change, and standing with others who had been silenced. Her journey was a testament to resilience, the power to face darkness and choose to shine. As she walked the city streets, head held high, she knew the fight was far from over. But so was her courage.